"I'll give you my entire salary if you translate this," the millionaire boss said with a cruel laugh, looking at the cleaner. He had no idea he was betting against the wrong person. "Get out of the way, important people are coming through," Danilo Souza shouted at Renata Silva, pushing her cleaning cart so hard it nearly toppled her over. It was a Tuesday in March, and he was in a particularly foul mood, having lost a multi-million-dollar contract the week before. Renata simply lowered her head and mumbled an apology as she retreated to the corner of the hallway. Danilo, 42, was the head of one of São Paulo's largest import companies. He wore suits that cost more than most of his employees' annual salaries and carried the arrogant air of a man who had never had to work for anything in his life. To him, people like Renata were just inconvenient obstacles in his path. "Mariana!" he yelled at his secretary as he stormed into his office. "How many times do I have to tell these cleaning people not to get in the way when I'm arriving?" Mariana, 35, had worked for him for 8 years and was well acquainted with his explosive temper. "Mr. Danilo, she was just doing her job." "Her job? Standing in the middle of the hallway is her job now," he retorted, slamming his briefcase onto his desk. "These people have no sense of hierarchy. They think they can occupy any space they want." Renata overheard everything from the corridor. At 43, she had been working there for 2 years and was used to this kind of treatment. Dressed in the simple blue uniform of the cleaning service, she was practically invisible to most of the employees. Yet she heard everything, observed everything, and quietly tucked away every single humiliation. The day proceeded as normal until the mail arrived, carrying a thick envelope with an international stamp addressed directly to Danilo. When he opened it, his expression changed completely. Inside were documents in a language he had never seen before, full of strange symbols and unpronounceable words. "What the devil is this?" he muttered, flipping through the papers with a look of disgust. "Looks like something from another planet." Mariana nervously approached as he started to yell again. "Mariana, come solve this mess. Someone sent me papers in an alien language." She took the documents and carefully examined them. "Mr. Danilo, it looks like it's Hungarian from Eastern Europe. There are official stamps and the company's name on it." "Hungarian?" Danilo laughed loudly, with the same mocking tone he always used when someone tried to sound smarter than him. "Who the hell speaks Hungarian in Brazil? This must be some kind of international scam." But when Mariana pointed out that there were numbers that looked like euro values at today's date, he realized it might be serious. "Then, find a translator. There must be someone out there who can solve this quickly." That's when the panic began. Mariana called every translation company she knew, but none had specialists available for less common languages. As the hours passed, Danilo grew more and more agitated. "What do you mean, no one can do it?" he exploded, pounding his fist on the table. "I'll pay whatever it takes. This city has 8 million people, and no one can translate these cursed papers." The news spread through the office. Employees gathered, curious and trying to help with online translation apps, but nothing worked. Then, Amanda from the finance department brought him a terrifying piece of information. "Sir, official documents like this usually have a response deadline. If you ignore it, you could lose legal rights." Danilo looked at the papers again and saw a date clearly marked. Today, at 6 p.m. It was already nearly 3 p.m., and he began to sweat, realizing he could be losing an important opportunity. "This is ridiculous," he shouted to all the employees who had gathered. "A company my size can't solve a little translation problem?" His arrogance took over completely. In a fit of frustration, Danilo decided to turn it into a cruel joke. He held the documents up high and yelled for the whole office to hear. "Listen up, I'll give my entire month's salary to whoever can translate this." He laughed loudly, as if it were the funniest thing in the world. 45,000 Brazilian reals for anyone who understands this Martian language. The employees laughed along, thinking it was a joke. After all, $45,000 was more than most of their annual salaries. No one took him seriously. "For that price, I'd learn any language in 5 minutes," shouted Roberto from sales. The laughter grew even louder. The situation had become a collective comedy, with employees making jokes about made-up languages and extraterrestrial translators. Danilo loved being the center of attention, especially when he could show off his financial superiority. But in the midst of all the chaos, one person watched everything in absolute silence. Renata was in the hallway, organizing her cart, paying attention to every word. For 2 years, she had been treated as if she were invisible, heard prejudiced comments, and been ignored as if she weren't a person. When she got close enough to see the documents Danilo was waving around like trash, her eyes widened. It wasn't because of the language, but because of the content, which she understood perfectly. The papers were not spam or ordinary business correspondence. They were international inheritance documents informing him about $15 million left by a distant relative. Renata swallowed hard. The documents explained that Danilo had been located as the sole living heir of a deceased uncle in Hungary. But there was a deadline. He had to confirm receipt and begin the legal process by 6 p.m. that very day. She looked at the clock. It was 3:30 p.m. There was still time, but not much. And there was Danilo, making jokes about something that could completely change his life, offering his monthly salary to solve a problem that she could solve in 10 minutes. Renata felt a mix of indignation and opportunity. For 2 years, she had been humiliated, treated as if she was stupid, ignored as if she didn't exist. Now she had a chance to prove that appearances can be deceiving. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Excuse me, Mr. Danilo," she said in a firm but respectful voice. "I can help with the translation." The entire office fell silent. Everyone turned to stare at the cleaner who had dared to interrupt the boss's fun. Danilo stopped laughing and looked at her with an expression of total disbelief. "You what?" he asked, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "I said I can translate the documents for you," Renata repeated, standing tall. "I know the language." The laughter that erupted in the office was even louder than before. Employees laughed until they had tears in their eyes, thinking it was the most absurd joke they had ever heard. The cleaner wanted to translate documents that even professionals couldn't handle. Danilo laughed so hard he had to lean on his desk. "Did you hear that, everyone? The cleaner here is a polyglot." "Well, that's great, darling. So you're going to make me 15 million by translating some Hungarian papers." He didn't even know he had correctly guessed both the language and the amount, but Renata did, and she was ready to accept the challenge he had thrown out, unaware of who he was dealing with. "Look at this," Danilo continued, still laughing. "The woman who can't even clean the hallway properly wants to solve a problem that professional translators couldn't." The employees laughed even harder. Some even applauded, thinking it was the most hilarious show they had ever seen in the office, but Renata was unfazed. She knew exactly what she was doing. The clock was ticking, and in a few hours, that little joke would turn into the most expensive lesson Danilo Souza had ever learned in his life. "Mr. Danilo, I'm not joking," Renata said, taking another step forward as the office continued to roar with laughter. "I really can translate these documents." Danilo wiped the tears from his eyes and looked at her as if she were a talking animal. "Oh, sure you can. And I can fly too. Listen here, darling. Go back to your broom and let the adults solve serious problems." The collective laughter echoed through the office again. Mariana even felt bad for the situation, but didn't have the courage to intervene. After all, she also thought it was impossible for a cleaner to solve something that professional translators couldn't. Renata didn't move. She stood her ground, her eyes fixed on the documents Danilo was holding. "Could I at least take a look at the papers? Maybe I can identify some words." Identify some words, Roberto from sales shouted amidst the laughter. Lady, this isn't a child's game. These are complex legal documents. Just give it up, Amanda from finance added. You'll only make things worse. But Renata didn't give up. There was something in her posture that was captivating, a determination that didn't match the image everyone had of a simple cleaner. Mr. Danilo, you yourself said you would give your salary to whoever translated them. I'm offering to try. Danilo stopped laughing for a few seconds. There was something in her voice that bothered him, a confidence that shouldn't have been there. Fine, since you're so determined to embarrass yourself, I'll give you this chance. But when you fail, I want you to apologize to everyone here for wasting our time. He extended the documents to her with a dismissive gesture. Go on, genius. Show us how it's done. Renata took the papers carefully, as if she were holding something very valuable. The moment her eyes met the text, something in her expression changed completely. It was as if she had come back to life, as if a part of her that had been dormant for years had awakened. Conum levelet, she said in a low voice, reading a line from the document. Telt Danilo Souza ur. The office fell into absolute silence. Everyone stopped laughing instantly. It was impossible to fake that perfect pronunciation, that natural fluency that flowed from Renata's mouth as if she had been born speaking Hungarian. Danilo's jaw literally dropped. You're actually reading this, he stammered. Yes, sir, Renata replied, her eyes still on the documents. It says, Dear Mr. Danilo Souza, we are writing to inform you about the legal situation regarding the inheritance left by your paternal uncle, Joseph Souza, who passed away in Budapest on February 15th of this year. Danilo's jaw dropped further. He had an uncle in Hungary. He had no idea. But even more shocking was hearing this woman he despised speaking a language he didn't even know existed with such perfection. Keep going, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Renata continued to read, translating with a fluency that left everyone speechless. Your uncle Joseph left an inheritance valued at $15 million, including properties in Budapest and a considerable bank account. As the sole living heir of the Souza family, you have the legal right to all assets. $15 million. The number echoed through the room like thunder. Danilo had to lean on the desk to keep from falling over. It was enough money to multiply his company by 10 and secure the future of 3 generations of his family. But there is a condition, Renata continued, turning the page. You must confirm receipt of this correspondence by 6 p.m. today, Brasilia time, and send the signed confirmation documents by midnight. If you fail to meet the deadline, the inheritance will be transferred to the Hungarian state. Danilo looked at the clock. 3:50 p.m., less than 4 hours to confirm and only 8 hours to send everything back. Despair completely overwhelmed him. How do you know Hungarian? He asked, still trying to process what was happening. Renata folded the documents carefully and handed them back to him. I was a language professor at the University of São Paulo, Mr. Danilo, she said calmly, specializing in Eastern European languages. I worked there for 15 years. The office fell silent again, but this time it wasn't from laughter. It was from pure shock. This woman they saw every day cleaning bathrooms and emptying trash cans had been a university professor. You were a professor? Mariana asked, genuinely curious. What happened? Renata sighed deeply. She didn't like talking about her past, but she knew she needed to explain to be taken seriously. I lost my job 2 years ago. I reported a corruption scheme at the university where some professors were selling grades and diplomas. I was fired for causing institutional instability. And after? Amanda asked, her expression now completely different. After that, I was blacklisted in the academic world. No one wanted to hire someone who had reported their colleagues. My husband was unemployed and my daughter needed medical treatment. I took the first job that came along. Renata's story hit the office like a bomb. Employees who had minutes earlier been laughing at her now looked at her with a mix of respect and pity. It was impossible to imagine that this silent woman who cleaned their offices every day had once been a respected professor. "Are you sure about the translation?" Danilo asked, still in disbelief. "I am, sir. I can translate the entire document word for word if you want. I can also help with the response that needs to be sent." Danilo started pacing, his brain working 1,000 miles an hour. $15 million, a fortune that was literally in the hands of the woman he had humiliated just minutes ago. Okay, he said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Let's say you really do know Hungarian, but that doesn't mean you understand complex legal documents. You could be translating it wrong." Renata remained calm. "Mr. Danilo, besides Hungarian, I speak German, French, Italian, and Russian. I have a master's degree in legal translation and worked as an official translator for the Hungarian consulate before I started at the university." Each revelation was like a slap in Danilo's face. This woman he treated like dirt had a resume he could only dream of having, but his arrogance still got the better of him. "Even so, I could be paying you to make up anything," he said, crossing his arms. "How do I know?" "You're not lying about the value." That's when Renata did something no one expected. She took out her old cell phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. "Hello, Hungarian consulate. This is Renata Silva, former official translator. Could you confirm the authenticity of some documents for me?" She gave the details from the document header, spoke in Hungarian for a few minutes, and then hung up. "Confirmed," she said. "The documents are authentic. They were sent by the Kovacs and Associates law firm in Budapest. The inheritance is real." The silence in the office was deafening. Danilo felt as if the floor were opening up beneath his feet. Not only was the inheritance real, but the woman he despised was the only person there capable of saving him. "How much do you want for the full translation?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. "You already made an offer," Renata replied, looking him directly in the eye. "Your monthly salary, $45,000. Danilo swallowed hard. It was a large sum, but compared to $15 million, it was nothing. "Okay, I accept, but everything has to be ready by 6 p.m. "It will be," Renata said with confidence, "but I'll need a computer, internet access, and no interruptions." "Mariana, clear out the conference room for her," Danilo ordered, still dazed, "and give her everything she needs." As Renata headed to the conference room, employees began to whisper to each other. It was impossible to fully process what had happened. The invisible cleaner had revealed herself to be a highly qualified professional and was now about to save the company from a lost opportunity. "I can't believe she really knows Hungarian," Roberto murmured to Amanda. "Dude, she called the consulate right in front of us," Amanda replied. "You can't fake something like that." Danilo stood in the middle of the office, still trying to understand how he had underestimated someone so completely. For 2 years, a former university professor had been cleaning his office, and he had never noticed. Worse, he had treated her as if she were inferior, as if she was stupid, but his arrogance hadn't completely disappeared. "Well, at least we found out she's not a common cleaner," he said to Mariana. "But I still think this whole story is strange." In the conference room, Renata sat down at the computer and started to work. For the first time in 2 years, she felt truly useful again. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, translating not just the words, but capturing all the legal nuances that an ordinary translator would miss. As she worked, she thought about everything she had been through. 2 years of humiliation, of being treated as if she were invisible, of hearing comments about her supposed stupidity. Now, ironically, she was the one saving the man who had despised her the most. The clock read 4:15 p.m. There was still time, but she knew she had to be perfect. Not just because she was being well paid for it, but because she wanted to prove to herself that she was still competent, that she still had value. Outside, Danilo paced nervously, looking into the conference room every 5 minutes. 15 million depended on the woman he had called incompetent an hour earlier. The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone in the office. The person he respected the least had become the most important of all. At 4:45 p.m., Renata came out of the conference room with a pile of papers in her hands and an expression Danilo couldn't decipher. The entire office stopped to watch as she approached his desk, walking with a posture that no longer matched the cleaner's image they all had of her. "It's ready, Mr. Danilo," she said, placing the organized documents on his desk. Complete translation with all legal terms explained and the response letter already drafted in Hungarian. Danilo took the papers with trembling hands. The translation was impeccable, with every paragraph explained in detail. It wasn't just a literal translation, but a professional document that included explanatory notes about the Hungarian legal process. "It's all here about the inheritance," Renata continued, pointing to specific sections. "Your Uncle Joseph owned 3 properties in Budapest, including a historic hotel in the city centre. He had no children, and you were located through genealogical records as the sole living heir." Danilo's eyes widened as he read each line. The fortune was even greater than he had imagined. In addition to the 15 million in the bank, there were properties worth at least another $10 million. "And this response letter?" he asked, picking up a document drafted in Hungarian with perfect handwriting. "Official confirmation of receipt and acceptance of the inheritance," Renata explained. "It needs to be sent by express mail today. I also prepared a power of attorney for the Hungarian lawyers to begin the transfer process." Mariana came over to see the documents. "Renata, this is incredible. It looks like the work of an international law firm." "It is," Renata replied simply. "I've done hundreds of similar documents when I worked at the consulate." Danilo looked at her with a completely new expression. It was no longer contempt or condescension. It was a mix of forced respect and discomfort at having to admit he was wrong. "You really understand all this?" he said, a statement that sounded like a question. "Yes, sir. I worked with international successions for 8 years before going to the university. I know Hungarian law as if it were Brazilian." Roberto from sales came over curious. "Renata, I'm sorry to ask, but how did someone with your background end up working as a cleaner?" The question everyone wanted to ask had finally been spoken. Renata took a deep breath, knowing she had to tell a story she preferred to keep buried. "It wasn't by choice," she began, sitting in the chair Danilo offered her. "As I said, I reported a scheme at the university. Some professors were selling diplomas to foreigners, falsifying transcripts, charging bribes for approval." "And then?" Amanda asked, genuinely interested. "Then I became enemy number 1 of the institution. They not only fired me, but spread the word that I was problematic, destabilizing, and difficult to work with. No university wanted to hire me." The office fell silent. It was a situation they all knew about indirectly but had never seen up close. Someone who had paid the price for doing the right thing. "I tried to work as a freelance translator," Renata continued, "but the market was saturated, plus my husband had lost his job at the same time. He was an engineer at a construction company that went bankrupt." "And your daughter?" Mariana asked softly. "My daughter, Sophia, is 16 and has type 1 diabetes. She needs imported insulin, regular exams, and constant medical care. Our health plan was cut when we lost our jobs." Danilo felt a pang in his chest. For 2 years, he had been mistreating a woman who was fighting to keep her daughter alive. Guilt began to set in, but he tried to hide it. "Is that why you took a job as a cleaner?" he asked, avoiding eye contact. "I had no choice. I needed a job with a formal contract to get a company health plan. When the cleaning company offered me the position, I accepted it right away." "But that was 2 years ago," Roberto observed. Why didn't you look for another job after that? Renata smiled bitterly. Do you think it's easy to explain in an interview why a former university professor is working as a cleaner? People think you're lying or that you did something very wrong. The truth was more painful than anyone in the office was prepared to hear. For 2 years, they had been living with a highly qualified woman, treating her as if she were invisible, as if she were less capable than any of them. Besides, Renata continued, the salary here, even though it's low, was at least fixed. I could pay for Sophia's treatment and keep our home. It wasn't my dream job, but it was a dignified one. Danilo shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He remembered all the times he had complained about her to Mariana, how he had treated the cleaning staff as if they were objects. Did you never think of telling anyone about your background? Amanda asked. Why? So you would think I was lying, so I would be fired for not fitting the profile? Renata shook her head. I learned that sometimes it's better to be underestimated than discredited. And your husband? How did he handle all this? Mariana asked. My husband Carlos got a job as an app driver. He earns less than me, but at least we're surviving. He supports me in everything. He never made me feel less because of my job. Danilo looked at the clock. 5:15 p.m. There was still time to send the documents, but he needed to go to the post office personally to make sure they arrived on time. Renata, I need to go to the post office now, he said, standing up. But first, I want to say something. Everyone in the office paid attention. Danilo rarely made speeches, and when he did, it was usually to complain about something. I treated you badly for these 2 years, he began, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't know your story, but that doesn't justify it. No one deserves to be treated the way I treated you. Renata looked at him with a neutral expression. Thank you for acknowledging that, Mr. Danilo. No, let me finish, he insisted. You just saved me from losing the biggest opportunity of my life, an opportunity I almost threw away out of sheer arrogance. The office was in absolute silence. They had never seen Danilo apologize to anyone, much less to an employee. You will receive the $45,000 I promised, he continued, but in addition to that, I want to offer you a real job as a translation consultant for the company. A salary of $10,000 per month with full benefits. The offer took Renata by surprise. She had expected to get the money and go back to her normal routine, but didn't expect a job proposal. I don't know what to say, she replied honestly. Take your time to think about it, Danilo said, picking up the documents. But know that it would be an honor to have someone with your qualifications officially working for the company. As he ran out the door to the post office, the office was left in a strange atmosphere. Employees who had minutes earlier seen Renata as a cleaner now looked at her as a respected professional. Renata, Roberto approached her, I want to apologize. I laughed at you today and that was wrong. Me too, Amanda added. I never imagined you had been through all that. One by one, employees came to apologize. Renata accepted the apologies politely, but it was clear the situation made her uncomfortable. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. You don't need to apologize, she said. I know it was just an unusual situation. But we do, Mariana insisted. We worked with you for 2 years and never bothered to really get to know you. Renata smiled for the first time that day. Thank you. That means a lot to me. At 6:20 p.m., Danilo returned from the post office, sweaty and out of breath but relieved. I did it. Documents sent with guaranteed delivery tomorrow morning in Budapest. He approached Renata, who was still in the office talking to other employees. So, what do you think of the proposal? Mr. Danilo, it's a generous offer, she replied, but I need to think. It's not a simple decision. Of course, I understand, but I hope you accept. Having someone with your experience would be incredible for our international business. Renata nodded. I'll talk to my husband and give you an answer tomorrow. Perfect, Danilo smiled. And Renata, Yes? Thank you. Not just for the translation, but for teaching me a lesson I needed to learn. Renata picked up her bag and headed for the door. See you tomorrow, everyone. When she left, the office fell silent again. Everyone was processing what had happened. A woman they had seen as invisible had revealed herself to be the most competent person in the place. Man, Roberto murmured. We worked with a former university professor for 2 years and never knew it. I wonder how many other people we misjudge every day, Amanda reflected. Danilo sat down in his chair, still processing everything. $15 million was on its way, but more importantly, he had learned something about himself that he didn't like at all. For 2 years, he had treated an extraordinary woman as if she were trash, and ironically, she was the one who had saved him when he needed it most. The lesson was just beginning. The next morning, Renata arrived at the office at her usual time, 7 a.m., but this time she wasn't wearing the blue uniform of the cleaning company. She wore a simple white social blouse and black pants that made her look like a completely different person. The employees who arrived early were surprised to see her at the reception, sitting in the chairs reserved for visitors. Good morning, Renata, Paula, the receptionist, greeted her with a genuine smile. You look beautiful today, very different. Thank you, Paula. I'm waiting for Mr. Danilo to give him my answer about the job proposal. Oh, that's great. I hope you accept. Everyone was talking about your story yesterday. It's incredible what you went through. Renata smiled, still getting used to the fact that people now saw her differently. For 2 years, she had been practically invisible, and now everyone wanted to talk to her. Danilo arrived at 8:30 a.m., half an hour earlier than usual. He was anxious to hear Renata's answer, but also nervous about what it would be like to work with someone he had treated so badly. Good morning, Renata, he said, approaching the reception desk. Have you decided? Good morning, Mr. Danilo. Yes, I accept your proposal, but I have a few conditions. Of course, go ahead. First, I'd like to work part-time for the first 2 weeks to train my replacement in cleaning. I don't want to leave the company in a bind. Danilo was impressed. Even after everything she had been through, she still cared about the job she was leaving behind. Second, she continued, I want my salary to be deposited directly into the account of the clinic where my daughter is being treated. I don't want to risk any payment delays. No problem. Yes, I want a written contract with all my functions clearly defined. I don't want anyone in the future to be able to say I wasn't qualified for the position. Danilo nodded. Fair enough. I'll ask the legal department to prepare everything today. They went up to the office, where Mariana was already organizing the day's schedule. When she saw Renata, she smiled and stood up to greet her. Renata, I'm so glad you accepted. It's going to be wonderful working with you officially. Thank you, Mariana. I'm excited too. Danilo headed to his office, but before entering he turned to Renata. Oh, I forgot to mention. An email arrived from Budapest this morning. The lawyers confirmed receipt of the documents. They said it was the most impeccable translation work they had ever seen. Renata smiled. I'm glad they liked it. They didn't just like it. They want to hire you for other cases. It seems you have a reputation there that I didn't know about. It's possible. I worked with the Kovacs and Associates firm a few times when I was at the consulate. Throughout the morning, Renata was officially introduced to all the departments. It was strange to see people's reactions. Some were still processing the transformation, while others greeted her with genuine respect. At 10 a.m., Danilo received a call that completely changed the course of the day. Mr. Danilo, Mariana called him on the intercom. There's a Mr. Joseph Kovacs on the line. He says he's a lawyer from Budapest and that it's urgent. Danilo answered immediately. The conversation was in English, but he asked Renata to translate some of the more complex parts. After 20 minutes, he hung up with a worried expression. Renata, we have a problem, he said. More documents have arrived from Budapest. It seems the inheritance has more complications than we imagined. What kind of complication? I didn't quite understand. He said something about a legal challenge, other relatives who have appeared, and pending lawsuits. He asked me to send a detailed response by tonight. Renata frowned. That's strange. Yesterday's documents clearly said you were the sole living heir. I know, but now it seems there are other people involved. And the worst part is, if I don't resolve this by midnight, I could lose everything. Danilo was clearly nervous. Yesterday he had discovered he was a millionaire, and now he could lose it all because of a legal complication he didn't understand. Calm down, Renata said, keeping her voice steady. Let's wait for the documents to arrive and analyze them carefully. Experience tells me these situations usually have a solution. At 2 p.m., a courier arrived with a thick envelope from the Hungarian consulate. It was at least 20 pages of legal documents, all in Hungarian, with complex legal language. Renata locked herself in the conference room to analyze everything. Danilo paced nervously outside, asking every 15 minutes if she was done. Danilo, let her work, Mariana chided him. You're more nervous than a student on exam day. 15 million, Mariana, do you understand? I understand, but being nervous won't help. Trust Renata. At 4 p.m., Renata finally came out of the room with a serious expression. Danilo ran to her immediately. So, what's going on? Sit down, Danilo. This is more complicated than we thought. All the employees came closer to listen. The situation had become the most important event that had ever happened in the office. 3 people have appeared claiming to be relatives of your uncle Joseph, Renata began. 2 distant cousins and a woman who claims to have been his common-law wife. Is that possible? Yesterday you said I was the only heir. I said that based on the documents we received yesterday, but inheritance law in Hungary is different from Brazil. Relatives can contest wills up to 6 months after the death. Danilo ran a hand through his hair in despair. So I'm going to lose everything? Not necessarily, but you will have to prove that you have a legal right to the inheritance, and that means going to Budapest. Go to Budapest? When? Tomorrow. The office fell into absolute silence. Danilo looked at Renata as if she had lost her mind. Tomorrow? That's impossible. I don't speak Hungarian. I don't know anything there. I don't even know how their legal system works. That's why you're not going alone, Renata said calmly. I'm going with you. You? I know the Hungarian legal system. I speak the language perfectly and I have contacts in Budapest. Without professional help, you will definitely lose everything. Danilo sat down, trying to process it all. But that's going to cost a fortune. Flights, hotels, lawyers. Danilo, you're talking about $15 million? Spending $20,000 to secure that is an investment, not an expense. And what if I still lose? Then at least you'll know you tried everything, but if you don't go, you'll lose for sure. Mariana came over. Danilo, Renata is right. You have to go. But what about the company? I can't just disappear overnight. I'll take care of everything here, Mariana offered. You stay as long as you need. Danilo looked at Renata again. You would really do that? Travel to Budapest to help me? I would, but obviously not for free. I want 5% of what you manage to recover. 5%, Danilo quickly calculated. That's almost $1 million. Exactly. And that's what any international lawyer would charge for a case like this, probably more. Danilo thought for a few seconds. $1 million was a lot of money, but compared to losing $15 million, it was nothing. Okay, he said, extending his hand. I accept. Renata shook his hand. Then let's get everything ready. I need to call my contacts in Budapest. You need to get an express passport, and we have to book flights for tomorrow night. Tomorrow night? Not too fast, Renata. The legal hearing is the day after tomorrow morning. If we're not there, you lose everything automatically. The office became a hive of activity. Mariana ran to the travel agency. Roberto went to get the documents for the express passport. Amanda organized Danilo's schedule, and Renata made calls to Budapest. "I got it," she said to Danilo after an hour on the phone. "My former colleague Andras will meet us at the airport. He's a lawyer specializing in international successions. Is he good?" "He's one of the best in Hungary and owes me a few favors." Danilo sighed with relief. "At least we have help there." "We do. But Danilo, I need you to understand one thing." "What's that?" "There you'll be just another foreigner trying to get an inheritance. I'll be your only bridge to their legal system. So for God's sake, don't treat me like you did here." Danilo flushed. "Renata, You don't need to explain. You just need to respect me, because if you humiliate me in front of the Hungarians, they will take their side, and then you can forget about any chance of winning." "I understand. I promise it won't happen." "Great. Now let's prepare the documents we need to take with us." As they worked together organizing papers, Danilo watched Renata with growing admiration. She was completely in command of the situation, solving problems he didn't even know existed, speaking with international lawyers as if they were old friends. "Renata," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you helping me? After everything I've done, you could just let me get myself into trouble alone." Renata stopped organizing the papers and looked at him. "Because, Danilo, I'm not you. I don't treat people badly just because I can." The answer was like a punch to the stomach. Danilo realized he still had a lot to learn about character and dignity. "Besides," she continued, $1 million will change my family's life. My daughter will be able to get treatment abroad, my husband will be able to go back to school, and I will be able to restart my career. You deserve that and so much more." Danilo said sincerely. "Thank you. Now let's get back to work. We have a flight to catch tomorrow." The flight to Budapest left Guarulhos Airport at 11 p.m., with a layover in Frankfurt. Danilo was visibly nervous, checking his phone every 5 minutes and constantly asking Renata if she was sure everything would be okay. She, on the other hand, was calm and focused, reviewing documents and making notes in Hungarian. "Have you been to Budapest before?" Danilo asked when the plane took off. "Several times. I was part of a Brazilian delegation for consular affairs. For 3 years. I know the city like it's São Paulo. And this Andras who's meeting us, I met him at a conference on international law. We worked together on some cases of Brazilians who died in Hungary leaving an inheritance. He's very serious, but fair." Danilo tried to relax, but couldn't stop thinking about everything that was at stake. "Renata, do you really think we have a chance to win?" "Danilo, stop asking that. We're going to get there. I'll analyze the documents calmly. I'll talk to Andras about the legal strategy. After that, we'll know exactly where we stand." The flight was long and tiring. Danilo barely slept, while Renata took the opportunity to study Hungarian laws on the tablet she had brought. When they arrived in Budapest at 2 p.m. local time, she was fully prepared. Andras Kovacs was waiting for them at the airport, a 50-year-old man with grey hair, impeccably dressed in a dark suit. When he saw Renata, he smiled and greeted her in Hungarian with a warm hug. "Renata, it's good to see you. You look great," he said in Portuguese with a heavy accent. "Andras, thank you for meeting us. This is Danilo Souza, my client." Andras greeted Danilo with a firm handshake. "Mr. Danilo, I read the documents Renata sent me. The situation is complex, but not impossible." In the car on the way to the hotel, Andras explained the scenario better. 3 people are contesting the inheritance. 2 cousins claim Joseph promised to leave properties to them. The woman says she was his common-law wife. They lived together for 10 years. "Is that true?" Danilo asked. "We don't know yet. Tomorrow we will go to the registry office to analyze the original documents. Then we'll go to the law firm that is handling the inheritance." Renata translated everything for Danilo, who was getting more and more worried. It seems like everyone in Hungary knew my uncle except for me. That's normal in cases of international inheritance, Andras explained. Relatives appear like mushrooms. After the rain, when there's money involved, they arrived at the hotel in the center of Budapest, an elegant, historic building. Danilo had reserved 2 suites, wanting to show that he had the money to back up his claims. "Danilo, get some rest," Renata suggested. "Tomorrow is going to be a long day." "Aren't you going to rest?" "I'm meeting with Andras to review the strategy. I need to understand exactly what the weaknesses of the contestation are." Danilo was impressed once again. While he was nervous and lost, Renata was methodically working to solve the problem. The next morning, at 8 a.m. sharp, they were at the Central Registry Office in Budapest. It was an old building with dark corridors and employees who seemed to have stepped out of a period film. "This is different from Brazil," Danilo murmured while waiting in a huge line. "Hungary has more complex bureaucracy than Brazil," Andras explained, "but also more organized. All the documents have been here since the 1800s. When they reached the counter, Renata spoke in Hungarian with an elderly employee who seemed to know her. After a few minutes, they were led to a special room where they could examine the original document. "What did she say?" Danilo asked. "That she remembers me from my time at the consulate. That helps a lot. Hungarians respect people who speak their language correctly." They spent 3 hours examining documents, birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, property records, and wills. Renata read everything carefully, making notes and discussing details with Andras. "I found something interesting," she said to Danilo. "Your uncle Joseph made 3 different wills in the last 5 years. Is that legal?" "Yes, but the last will, made 3 months before his death, is very specific. It revokes all previous wills and leaves everything to his only living nephew in Brazil." Andras nodded. "This greatly strengthens your position, but you still need to prove that you are really his nephew. And how do we do that? We need your father's birth certificate and your grandparents' marriage certificate. This will prove the family lineage." Danilo paled. "I didn't bring those documents. I didn't even know I'd need them." "Calm down," Renata said. "I can ask Mariana to get everything in São Paulo and send it by express mail. It will arrive tomorrow morning." "But the hearing is tomorrow afternoon." "That's enough time," Andras assured them. "Hungarians are punctual, but not in a hurry." They left the registry office and went to lunch at a traditional Hungarian restaurant. Danilo could barely eat, but Renata talked calmly with Andras about the city, politics, everything but the inheritance. "How can you be so calm?" Danilo asked. "Because being nervous doesn't solve anything. I've already done everything I could do today. Tomorrow we'll see the result." In the afternoon, they visited the law firm that was handling the inheritance. It was a modern building, completely different from the registry office. The lawyer in charge, Dr. Peter Sabo, received them in an elegant conference room. "Mr. Danilo, it's a pleasure to meet you," he said in English. "We analyzed the documents that Ms. Renata sent. Impeccable work." "Thank you," Danilo replied, still relying on Renata to translate the more complex part. "But we have problems," Dr. Sabo continued. "The contestants have very aggressive lawyers. They're going to question everything, from the authenticity of the documents to your real identity. And if they can prove that I'm not a relative, then the inheritance goes to the Hungarian state. Nobody gets any." Renata leaned forward. "Dr. Sabo, what is the most effective strategy?" "To prove not only that Danilo is the nephew, but that Joseph really wanted to leave the inheritance to him. We have to show that the last wills were not made under pressure or manipulation." "How do we do that?" "Witnesses, people who knew Joseph in his last years and can confirm that he talked about his nephew in Brazil." Danilo became animated. Do such people exist? Yes, his doctor, neighbors, a domestic helper. The problem is that the contestants also have witnesses. So it's going to be my word against theirs? No, Renata intervened. It's going to be evidence against evidence, and we have an advantage. What advantage? The last will is very specific. Joseph not only leaves the inheritance to you, but explains why. He says he always wanted to meet his family in Brazil, that he regretted losing contact with his brother. Andras nodded. This is emotionally strong. Hungarian judges are sensitive to family stories. Besides, Renata continued, the contestants have to prove that they deserve the inheritance. It's not enough to just claim a relationship. They have to show that Joseph promised to leave them his assets. Dr. Sabo smiled. Ms. Renata understands Hungarian law better than many local lawyers. I worked with this for years, she replied modestly. They returned to the hotel late in the afternoon. Danilo was exhausted, but Renata continued to work, organizing documents and preparing arguments for the hearing. Can I ask you something? Danilo said when they were in the hotel lobby. Of course. Why do you know so much about Hungarian law? It's like you know every detail. Renata smiled. My master's thesis was on international successions in Eastern Europe. I spent 2 years studying specific cases in Hungary. You really are impressive. Thank you. Now go and rest. Tomorrow you'll need to be focused. That night, Danilo barely slept. He kept thinking about how he had underestimated Renata for so long. Not only was she highly qualified, but she was completely dedicated to solving a problem that wasn't her. Early in the morning, the documents arrived from São Paulo. Mariana had managed to get everything they needed with notary authentication and sworn translation. Perfect, Andras said, examining the papers. Now we have complete evidence of the family lineage. At 2 p.m., they were at the courthouse. It was an imposing building with classic European architecture. Danilo was wearing his best suit, but still felt small compared to the solemnity of the environment. Remember? Renata said as they waited. Let me do the talking. Only answer when you're asked directly and always with a calm voice. I understand. And Danilo? Yes. Thank you for trusting me. Danilo looked at her sincerely. Renata, if I win this inheritance, it will be because you made it possible. I'll never forget that. The judge entered the room, and the hearing began. In a few hours, they would know if $15 million would change Danilo's life, or if it had all been an impossible dream. But one thing had already changed forever. Danilo would never again judge someone by their appearance or social position. Renata had taught him the most valuable lesson of his life. The courtroom was tense when Judge L. Farkas, as a 60-year-old man with a grey beard and thick-rimmed glasses, called everyone to approach. Danilo felt his heart pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. Renata, sitting next to him, maintained an upright and focused posture, whispering translations of the Hungarian procedure. The court is in session, the judge announced in Hungarian, and Renata immediately translated for Danilo. We are here to resolve the contestation of the inheritance of Joseph Souza, who passed away on February 15th. On the opposite side of the room, the 3 contestants were seated with their lawyers. Esther Nagy, a 50-year-old woman with blonde hair and a determined expression, who claimed to have been Joseph's common-law wife. The 2 cousins, Mirali and Bela Kovacs, middle-aged men wearing cheap suits and looking at Danilo with clear resentment. Dr. Sabo, the judge addressed Danilo's lawyer, present your client's evidence. Dr. Sabo stood up and began to speak in Hungarian. Renata translated quietly for Danilo. He is presenting the family tree that proves you are Joseph's nephew. He is showing your father's birth certificate, your grandparents' marriage certificate. That's good, Danilo whispered. Very good. The documents are irrefutable. Esther's lawyer, Dr. Tamas Varga, stood up to object. He was a thin, 40-year-old man with an aggressive air that bothered even the Hungarians present. Your Honor, he said, documents can be forged. How do we know this Brazilian is really who he says he is? Renata leaned forward, whispering something to Dr. Sabot, who immediately responded, Your Honor, all the documents have been authenticated by the Hungarian consulate in Brazil. Furthermore, we have a DNA test that proves the family lineage. Danilo's eyes widened. A DNA test? When did we do that? Last night, Renata whispered. I asked Andras to get a hair sample from your uncle that was stored at the Forensic Medical Institute. We compared it with your saliva, and it came back positive. You are, of course, really his nephew. The judge examined the DNA test documents, checking stamps and signatures. Everything seems to be in order, he said. Mr. Danilo Souza is proven to be the nephew of Joseph Souza. The contestants were visibly nervous. Their first argument had failed. Dr. Varga tried another angle. Your Honor, even if he is the nephew, that doesn't mean Joseph wanted to leave the inheritance to him. My client lived with the deceased for 10 years. She took care of him, loved him. She was his true companion. Esther stood up and began to speak in Hungarian with tears in her eyes. Renata translated. She's saying that Joseph promised to leave everything to her, that they were like husband and wife, that she sacrificed her life to take care of him. Is that true? Danilo asked. We don't know, but we're about to find out. Dr. Sabot stood up again. Your Honor, if Miss Esther really lived with Joseph as his wife, where is the marriage certificate? Where are the photos together? Where are the witnesses to this union? Esther started speaking louder, clearly agitated. The judge asked her to calm down. She's saying that Joseph didn't want to get married officially because he was afraid that his family in Brazil would appear to claim the inheritance, Renata translated. How convenient, Danilo murmured. Dr. Sabot continued. Your Honor, we have here the testimony of 3 of Joseph's neighbors who confirm that the lady only appeared in his life in the last 6 months, when he was already very ill. 6 months, Danilo whispered. Exactly. Not 10 years like she claimed. She took care of him when he was dying, hoping he would change his will. The cousin's lawyer, Dr. Istvan Munar, stood up to defend his clients. Your Honor, my clients are Joseph's blood relatives. They grew up together, played together. They were like brothers. Is that possible? Danilo asked. Yes, but it's irrelevant, Renata replied. Kinship does not guarantee an automatic inheritance. The will decides, Dr. Munar continued. Joseph verbally promised that he would leave the properties to my clients. He said this several times in front of witnesses. Where are those witnesses? Dr. Sabot asked immediately. They are here to testify, Dr. Munar replied, motioning to 3 people at the back of the room. The witnesses were called one by one. They were elderly neighbors who confirmed that Joseph had commented on leaving properties to his cousin. But when Dr. Sabot began to ask detailed questions, the stories didn't match. When exactly did Joseph say this? He asked the first witness. About 2 years ago, she replied hesitantly. And to the second witness, did you hear the same conversation? Yes, but it was 3 years ago. And to the third, do you confirm that it was 3 years ago? No, sir. It was last year. Renata smiled discreetly. They coordinated their testimony, but they didn't coordinate the details. This completely discredits their testimony. The judge also noticed the contradiction. The witnesses present different versions of the same event. This compromises their credibility. Dr. Sabot seized the moment. Your Honor, I would like to present Joseph's last will, drafted 3 months before his death. The judge took the document and read it aloud. Renata translated for Danilo. I, Joseph Souza, in full conscience and without coercion, leave all my assets to my nephew Danilo Souza, who lives in Brazil. I have always regretted losing contact with my brother Miguel. I hope that through this inheritance I can reconnect with the family I left behind. The room fell silent. It was a moving will that clearly showed Joseph's intention. Furthermore, Dr. Sabo continued. We have here a letter that Joseph was writing to Mr. Danilo, found unfinished on his desk. The judge read the letter, which began with, Dear nephew Danilo, I know you don't even know I exist, but I have always thought of you and the family in Brazil. Danilo felt his eyes well up with tears. For the first time, he felt a real connection to the uncle he had never known. Your Honor, Dr. Varga tried one last bluff. How do we know this letter was not forged? How do we know the will is genuine? Because, Dr. Sabo replied calmly, they were handwritten by Joseph in the presence of 3 independent witnesses and registered at the official registry office 3 months before his death. The judge carefully examined the documents. Everything appears to be in order. The signatures are authentic. The stamps are official. Esther began to cry loudly, realizing she was losing. The cousins were talking nervously with their lawyer. Your Honor, Dr. Sabo made his conclusion. It is clear that Joseph wanted to leave his inheritance to his nephew in Brazil. He not only drafted a specific will, but also expressed this wish in a personal letter. Furthermore, he continued, the contestants' allegations are inconsistent. Ms. Esther lied about the time she lived with Joseph. The cousins presented witnesses who contradict each other. The judge carefully wrote everything down. I will analyze all the evidence presented. The decision will be announced in 1 hour. 1 hour? Danilo whispered. Is that fast? Very fast, Renata replied. It means the case is clear to him. They left the room and went to the hallway. Danilo was nervous, pacing back and forth. Renata remained calm, talking to Andrea about technical detail. Do you think we won? Danilo asked for the 10th time. Danilo, stop asking that. We presented solid evidence. The contestants presented weak allegations. Mathematically, we have at least an 80% chance. 80% isn't 100%. Nothing in life is 100%, but 80% is very good. Dr. Sabo approached them. Mr. Danilo, I'm confident. Judge Farkas is known for decisions based on evidence, not emotions. And that's good for us. Very good. Our evidence is irrefutable. Half an hour. Later, they were called back into the room. The judge had made his decision. After analyzing all the evidence presented, he began, This court decides that... Danilo squeezed Renata's hand, feeling like he was going to faint from nervousness. The inheritance of Joseph Souza legally belongs to Mr. Danilo Souza, his proven nephew. The room erupted in reactions. Esther cried louder. The cousins protested, but the judge banged his gavel. Final decision. Mr. Danilo Souza is the legal heir to all the assets left by Joseph Souza. Danilo couldn't believe it. $15 million was officially his. But more importantly, he had learned lessons about character, competence, and dignity that were worth much more than any money. Congratulations, Renata said, smiling genuinely. You did it. We did it, Danilo corrected. Without you, I would have lost everything. 3 months after the court's decision in Budapest, Danilo was in his completely renovated office, looking out the window at the bustling city of São Paulo. The company had grown exponentially with the inheritance investment and now occupied 3 floors of the commercial building. But the most important change was not in the financial numbers. It was in the company's culture. Danilo, the meeting with the new investors is in 10 minutes. Renata said, entering the room with a folder of documents. She was now the company's Director of International Relations, with a salary of $20,000 per month and a 5% share of the profits. She wore an elegant suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had proven her worth. Thank you, Renata. Did you review the contracts in German? All reviewed and translated. I also prepared an executive summary in Portuguese for you to present to the board. Danilo smiled. I don't know how I managed to work before you. You managed, but not with this efficiency, she replied, organizing the papers on the desk. By the way, I got a call from the Budapest office. 2. Brazilian clients need help with international inheritances. Can I accept the cases? Of course. In fact, how about we open a specific department for that? International inheritances and successions. You would be the director. Renata stopped organizing the documents and looked at him. Are you serious? Completely. I've already talked to the accountant. We can set up a team of 5 people with you coordinating everything. Danilo, that would be incredible. I've always dreamed of having my own department. Then consider it done. You deserve this and so much more. There was a knock on the door, and Mariana, now promoted to General Administrative Manager, and sorry to interrupt, but a special delivery arrived for Renata. It was a huge bouquet of flowers with a card in Hungarian. Renata read it and smiled emotionally. What does it say? Danilo asked. It's from András in Budapest. He got a very important case and wants me to be a technical consultant. He says my reputation in Hungary has grown a lot after your case. Your reputation has grown everywhere, Danilo said proudly. Last week I got a call from the Brazilian consulate asking if you would be interested in working as an official consultant. Seriously, they said you were the most competent translator they had ever met. Renata sat down, clearly emotional. You know, Danilo, sometimes I still don't believe all this is happening. 3 months ago, I was an invisible cleaner. And now, you are recognized for what you always were, an exceptional professional who never had the opportunity to show her worth. Thank you for giving me that opportunity, Renata. You gave me the opportunity. If it weren't for you, I would have lost $15 million out of sheer arrogance. They were interrupted by a celebration outside. Through the window they could see employees hugging and shouting with joy in the office. What's going on? Danilo asked. Mariana ran in with tears in her eyes. Danilo, Renata, you're not going to believe this. Sofia got into university. Sofia? Danilo asked, confused. My daughter, Renata explained, also starting to cry. She took the entrance exam for medicine at USP and got in first place. First place overall, Mariana shouted. Renata broke down in tears. For years, she had dreamed that her daughter could study medicine, but had never imagined it would be possible. Now, with the financial stability she had, Sofia could achieve any dream. Renata, that's wonderful. Danilo hugged her. Your daughter is going to be a doctor, the first doctor in the family, she said between tears. My father was a bricklayer. My mother was a domestic worker. I never imagined my daughter could go so far. She went far because she has an exceptional mother, Danilo said sincerely. A mother who never gave up, who fought with dignity, who showed that competence always triumphs over arrogance. At that moment, the door opened, and Sofia ran in. A 16-year-old girl, tall and smart like her mother. She threw herself into Renata's arms, crying with happiness. Mom, I did it, she cried. You did it, my daughter. I'm so proud of you. Danilo watched the family reunion with a heavy heart. He remembered how he had treated Renata, how he had mocked her abilities, how he had assumed she had no dreams or ambition. Now he saw that she not only had dreams, but had fought tirelessly, so her daughter could realize her. Sofia, he approached her. Congratulations on getting in. I know you'll be an exceptional. Thank you, Mr. Danilo. My mum always says you changed our family's life. Your mum changed mine, he replied. She taught me lessons I'll never forget. Carlos, Renata's husband, arrived at the office a few minutes later. He was a 45-year-old man, simple but dignified, who now worked as a logistics coordinator at Danilo's company. Love, congratulations on our daughter, he said, hugging Renata. Carlos, can you believe it? Our Sofia is going to be a doctor. I always believed it. She's smart like her mother. Danilo watched the reunited family and felt a deep gratitude. These people had not only helped him gain an inheritance, but had taught him what really mattered in life. Everyone, he said, getting everyone's attention, I want to make an announcement. The office fell silent. As you know, the company has grown a lot in recent months. We've had record profits, expanded our business, hired more employees. But more importantly, we've learned to value people. He looked directly at Renata. 3 months ago, I almost lost $15 million because I was too arrogant to recognize the talent that was right in front of me. I treated one of the most competent people I've ever met as if she were invisible. Danilo, Renata tried to interrupt. Let me finish. You saved me not just financially, but as a person. You taught me that competence has nothing to do with job title or salary. You taught me that dignity doesn't depend on a uniform or social position. The office was completely silent. Employees who had witnessed Danilo's transformation knew that this moment was special. That's why, he continued, I want to announce that from today on, 15% of the company's profits will be distributed equally among all employees. It doesn't matter if you're a director or a cleaner, if you have a diploma or not. Everyone who works here with honesty deserves to participate in our success. The reaction was immediate. Employees began to applaud. Some cried, others hugged each other. It was the first time many of them had felt truly valued in a job. Furthermore, Danilo continued, we're going to create a scholarship fund for employees' children. No one will ever stop studying for lack of money again. Sophia approached Danilo with tears in her eyes. Mr. Danilo, thank you. You have no idea how much this will help other families. Your mother taught me that everyone deserves a chance, he replied. Now it's my turn to give those chances. Renata approached and hugged him. Thank you, Danilo, not just for what you're doing now, but for having admitted you were wrong. Renata, I'm the one who should thank you. You showed me that the most important person in the office was being treated as the least important. That will never happen again. At that moment, Paula, the receptionist, came over with an envelope. Danilo, a registered letter arrived for you. It's from Budapest. Danilo opened the envelope and read the contents. It was an official letter from the Hungarian government offering him and Renata honorary citizenship in recognition of the exemplary work they did on the inheritance case. Renata, look at this, he said, showing her the letter. They're offering us Hungarian citizenship. Seriously. She read the letter quickly. This is a huge honor. Honorary citizenship is only given to people who have made significant contributions to Hungary. Do you accept? Of course. I do. I've always loved Hungarian, and you? I accept too. After all, it was in Hungary that I learned the most important lessons of my life. 6 months later, Danilo and Renata were in Budapest again, this time to officially receive their citizenship. The ceremony was held in the Parliament with the presence of the Prime Minister and various authorities. Mr. Danilo Souza and Ms. Renata Silva, the Prime Minister said in English, you are examples of how cultural differences can be overcome through competence and dignity. After the ceremony, they had dinner at the same restaurant where they had eaten during the legal process. Andras was present along with Dr. Sabot and others who had helped them. Danilo, Andras said, do you know that your story has become a case study at the University of Law here? A case study? Yes. Professors use your story to teach about the importance of recognizing talent and not judging people by appearance. How ironic. Danilo laughed. I should be the one embarrassed for having judged Renata for 2 years? But you learned, Renata said, and you changed. That's what matters. During dinner, Danilo reflected on everything that had happened a year ago. He was an arrogant businessman who treated employees like objects. Today, he ran a company based on respect and dignity, where everyone was valued regardless of their position or background. Renata, he said, can I ask you one more thing? Of course. Did you really forgive me? For all the years I treated you badly. Renata smiled. Danilo, I forgave you the moment you admitted you were wrong. To err is human. To admit the error and change is divine. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Besides, she continued, you gave me the opportunity to rebuild my life. My daughter is studying medicine. My husband has a dignified job. I'm back to working with what I love. I have no reason to hold a grudge. And I learned that competence has nothing to do with a uniform or job title, Danilo said. I learned that dignity doesn't depend on salary or social position. Exactly. And I learned that we should never underestimate anyone. All people have stories, dreams, talents. They just need an opportunity to show them. They returned to Brazil the next day, but now as honorary Hungarian citizens, and more importantly, as people who had learned fundamental lessons about respect and dignity. Back at the office, Danilo made sure to tell all the employees about the honor they had received, but what he was most proud of were not the titles or recognitions, but the transformation that had happened in his company. Everyone, he said at the monthly meeting, I want you to know that our company has become a benchmark, not just in business, but in human relations. Other companies are copying our model of valuing employees. That's thanks to the example you set, Mariana said. When you recognized Renata's worth, you showed that we all have value. And when you changed your attitude, Carlos added, you showed that people can change for the better. Danilo looked at Renata, who was sitting in the front row with Sophia beside her. The girl was now in her second semester of medicine, one of the best students in her class. Renata, he said, you saved more than a $15 million inheritance. You saved my humanity. And you gave me back my professional dignity, she replied. You showed that competence always triumphs over prejudice. So, are we even? We are, but more than that, we are examples that people can change, grow, and learn from each other. Danilo smiled. I'll give you my entire salary if you translate this. It had been a bet he made out of arrogance, but it turned out to be the sentence that changed his life forever. The invisible cleaner had become the most respected executive in the company, and the arrogant boss had learned that true success isn't about humiliating others, but about recognizing and valuing the talents that exist all around us. Sometimes the most important lessons in life come from the people we least expect, and sometimes a simple bet can change everything.